Hereford Livestock Market had the largest throughput of any municipally owned market in the country. They had over a 250,000 livestock going through the market in the course of a year. The only other market that was larger was Banbury Market, which was privately owned.
And on a Monday, it was all fat stock, right, such as sheep, cattle, and pigs. Then on a Tuesday once a month, it was horse sale. And on a Wednesday, it was sheep, pigs, and general stock, and calves, a lot of calves. Then a Thursday was store cattle. We'd have as many as 1,000 store cattle on a Thursday. And then on a Friday, it was dairy cows. And there'd be 150 dairy cows on a Friday. So it was used every day of the week, really, other than a Tuesday once a month.
Well, even when I started, it was more of a day out, but it has now changed out of all recognition. It's a business day. It's a working day. You come in, you do the business, and you go home again and set about the work again.
Wednesday was a fantastic day in Hereford. You know, I got to know a few of the men that brought poultry in. I used to meet up with a friend from Gloucester, and we'd have a look around the poultry market. Then we'd go up to town, have a cup of coffee, and come back to the market and see what my husband had bought.
Trevor, my father-in-law, was a great character, and he used to go into the poultry market on a Wednesday, and he used to buy lots of little bargains, and the van would come back bulging up the seams with ducks and geese and turkeys when it was the right time of year, and he'd take them home to Mum. They'd be fed if they were ready to kill. They would be done and taken back the following week. Otherwise, they would be fed up, and then they'd be taken back when they were ready. And Tuesdays was always a very busy day. Mum would be there. They'd be up to their knees in feathers, and then she'd dress them, and it was always a fun day. The children loved it. And then on a Wednesday morning, they'd be up, gone about 5-6 o'clock in the morning, get it all to Hereford, all to sell. But also in the back of this van, when you open the doors in the market, you may be surprised what you would find. He'd have a little crate, perhaps with some puppies in. He might have a sack with a couple of geese in that weren't good enough to kill, so they'd be back to be sold. And on some occasions, there might be an odd child in the back of the van. Probably not for sale, but...
I remember once there was quite a stir among the lady staff of the market. Would all of a sudden, Tom Jones is in the poultry market. What's going on? So they all scurried over there. Well, apparently, Tom Jones was there buying ducks for his estate. That's not unusual. And and there he was, large as life, buying poultry. So that was quite a stir at the poultry market.
I remember in the early 50s when I was very young. My father, who was a mixed small farmer in Herefordshire, taking pigs to Hereford Market, and in those days the market was stuffed with pigs every single Wednesday, and unless you were there very early in the morning, you had no chance of getting a pen. So Father used to take me in probably at about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning with the pigs, and when we arrived there with the first load, he used to get all the pigs out of the truck, put them in the pens to bring the next load to them, but I had to stay in the market and guard the pens to make sure some unworthy farmer next door didn't come and nick the pigs out and put his own in there, so I had to save the pens for my father. And it was quite cold sometimes when you were 4 or 5 years, 6 years old, I guess it was, whatever, yeah.
Well, I lived in with Cecil Watkins and Mrs. Watkins at Bridge Court with their 2 children. And when I was on school holidays, when the sheep had to go to Hereford, we used to drive them by road with Mr. Watkins with his dog and myself ahead of the sheep to close all the gates getting on into Hereford so they wouldn't go into people's gardens. But it did happen once or twice, and they was held let loose. But then we'd get into towards Hereford Market, and they'd be penned up, and I'd go to the Auctioneers office. There was a lovely lady there called Mrs. Pete, and I used to have to go and stand by Mr. Watkins, and she made sure I had a hot chocolate drink. She used to get one of her secretaries to go and make me one.
Obviously there wasn't the lorries, so most of the stock was walked in. Some came on the trains, but I remember my uncle telling me that he knew some old boys who'd seen the geese being driven to, he said, to Birmingham, but whether it was Birmingham, I don't know. But he said they used to walk the geese through tar and then let them go through some very fine gravel. And when that dried on their feet, it gave them a wearing pad so as they could walk geese to market or to the towns for slaughter.
Well, I'd be about 10 or 11, I think, and it'd be about 1935 or 1936. And of course, there wasn't the transport for animals in those days as it is today. And my father and I were walking a big old sow to the cattle market, and we got as far as Edgar Street, where the football stand is now. It used to be a corrugated iron fence in those days. And the poor old sow lay down and refused to go any further. We tried always prodding her, poking her, hitting her, but she wouldn't move. So in the end, in desperation, my father walked to the market and he brought back a big old cart that they used to use to transport the animals around the market, if they're difficult animals. And all these chaps were going to work on their bicycles, because there weren't very, very few cars in those days. And they all helped to lift and push and catch all this sow into this big old, it was like a bull cart really. And then we trundled it on into the market and we got her out okay then.
I moved to Hereford from the Midlands in 1970, and for about 6 years I lived in Edgar Street, dead opposite the cattle market. And one of my memories is going to the Rose Garden pub at Holmer and having to sort of take refuge in the hedges with 2 young children when crowds of horses sort of jostled and filled the lanes around Holmer, being driven by Welsh traders to the cattle market. I guess that was probably one of the last times that cattle and animals were driven on foot to the market.
The winter of 81-82 was a horrendous winter. It was the first winter my husband and I actually came to live up here. And we had great fun helping to take the poultry down that had been dressed. We had to walk across a field with it in big baskets, and then we had to walk down onto the road and across the drifts and down where we could meet a vehicle that could take us into Hereford. And coming back up sometimes in that vehicle was quite hairy, and I can remember having to sit on the Land Rover bonnet and jump up and down to try and weight it to get it to bounce back up on the snow. It was quite good fun.
Probably during the 30s, my grandfather had a lot of sheep, what we called a tack. That meant he'd got them out feeding on farms around the county. And he told me that in 1932, I think it was, that they brought a load of sheep in from Pontroilus on the train, to the old market. He didn't get a bid for them and decided to walk them home to Colwell, which is 17 miles away. They got him as far as Tarrington. That was my grandfather George and my uncle Walter, and the sheep were exhausted, so they put him in an orchard overnight, walked on to Ledbury, missed the last train home, and then walked on to Colwell and turned round and walked back the next day and continued their journey. We never have to face up to hardship like that today.